Have you ever sat down to study with a very clear intention? Today I'll focus. Today I'll finish this. But just a few minutes later, your hand is already on your phone. Not because there's an important message, but because your brain automatically looks for an escape. You go back to the page, read the same paragraph, once, then again. It feels familiar. You nod along. It feels like you understand it. But the moment you close the book, your mind goes blank. And that uncomfortable feeling shows up. Not because you didn't try, but because you tried hard and still didn't get any faster. If that feeling sounds familiar, like this video and subscribe to the channel right now. Because what's happening has nothing to do with willpower or motivation. It has everything to do with how your brain reacts to learning in the very first minutes. The most confusing part is the comparison. You look at other people. They study less. They don't seem more stressed. Yet they remember faster. They understand faster. They apply things faster. While the more time you put in, the heavier everything feels. And then a dangerous question appears in your mind. Am I slower than everyone else by one invisible step? A step I'll never be able to catch up to. Part 1. Why you feel like you learn slowly. This is where most people make their first mistake. They believe that if they're not progressing quickly, it must be because they're not working hard enough, not disciplined enough, not focused enough. That explanation sounds reasonable because it puts all the responsibility on you. And that's exactly why it's the biggest trap. Every time you feel slow, you don't look at how you're learning. You push yourself harder instead. Study longer, watch more videos, take thicker notes, highlight more lines. And every time you do that, you accidentally activate the very thing that's holding you back. Survival response. Your brain is not designed to optimize learning speed. It doesn't care whether you're progressing quickly or not. It only cares about one question. Is this safe in the brain? Danger isn't just accidents or physical pain. Danger is being wrong, being judged, being exposed as not knowing, falling behind in the eyes of others even when no one is actually watching. So when learning starts to feel uncomfortable, your brain doesn't ask, will this help me learn faster? It asks, how do I get out of this feeling? And that's when you reread, highlight, rewatch. Those actions feel safe, familiar, comfortable. Your brain likes that. But because they're too safe, your brain never receives the signal that this information needs to be kept long-term. This is something almost no one tells you. Many traditional study methods are designed to make you feel like you're learning, not to make your brain actually remember. When you reread a paragraph and it feels familiar, your brain doesn't treat that as an achievement. It treats it as a sign that it's already been seen. And things that have already been seen usually don't need to be stored carefully. That's why you can study for hours and forget everything a few days later. Not because you're bad at learning, but because your brain is doing exactly what it was designed to do. Discard information that doesn't send a strong signal. The real problem is this: you were never taught how to send the right signal. Meanwhile, fast learners don't have different brains than you. They also feel discomfort. They also fear being wrong. But they don't try to avoid that feeling. They understand that the discomfort itself is a sign that learning is happening. This is the first and most important difference. Not technique, not tools, but how you interpret the feeling when learning becomes difficult. Slow learners think discomfort means they're bad at this. Fast learners understand that discomfort means the brain is being forced to change. If you run away the moment it gets hard, your brain learns a very clear lesson. Avoidance is safe, and next time, it will pull you away from learning even sooner. If you stay even a little longer, your brain learns a different lesson. This feeling doesn't kill me, and that lesson is what unlocks speed. But to stay, you need to understand the next mechanism, the one your brain hates the most and the one that creates memory faster than anything else. Part 2. What your brain hates most is what makes you learn fastest. There's a paradox that, if you don't understand it, will keep you stuck in the same learning loop forever. The thing that makes you feel like you're learning the best is often the thing that makes you remember the least. And the thing that makes you feel the worst while studying is usually the thing that creates memory the fastest. It's called retrieval. Most people think learning is about putting information in, reading, watching, listening, taking notes. But your brain doesn't learn by receiving information. It learns by being forced to pull information back out. When you reread a page and nod along, your brain is doing something very simple. It's recognizing familiarity. Familiarity creates a sense of safety. Safety creates the feeling of "I've got this," and the brain stops there. But when you close the book and ask yourself, what was the main idea? Something very different happens. Your brain has to search, and that act of searching is what actually triggers learning. Here's the key part. The result matters less than the effort of retrieval, even if you can't remember anything, even if you get it wrong. The attempt itself sends a strong signal. This matters. Don't throw it away. That's why short quizzes, open-ended questions, and testing yourself before checking the answer work better than perfect review. It's not magic, it's biology. But if retrieval is so powerful, why does almost no one like using it? Because retrieval exposes what you don't know, and your brain hates that. When you can't remember an answer, the amygdala treats it as a small threat. Not a physical threat, but a cognitive and social one. The feeling of "I don't know" triggers an avoidance response. That's why you feel a familiar pull every time you're about to test yourself. Your brain suggests easier alternatives. Reread a bit more. Rewatch the video one more time. Prepare better before testing. It sounds reasonable. But that delay is exactly what slows you down. Fast learners aren't different from you here. They also hate that feeling, but they understand one crucial thing. Discomfort is not a wrong signal, it's the right one. Let's look at a very concrete example. A student studying anatomy. The common approach is to read the textbook, look at diagrams, and highlight terms. Everything looks clear when the book is open, but during the exam, the concepts blur together. Another student does the opposite. He reads a very small section, closes the book, takes a blank sheet of paper, and redraws everything from memory. He gets a lot wrong. It's uncomfortable, frustrating, but every mistake teaches his brain exactly where to pay attention. After a few rounds, he remembers far faster, not because he's smarter, but because his brain has been trained to treat not remembering as a learning signal, not a signal to escape. This applies to every field: languages, programming, abstract theory. If you only consume information, you'll always feel familiarity without usable skill. If you retrieve early, you force your brain to build structure. There's an important concept that goes hand in hand with retrieval. It's called desirable difficulty. Your brain learns best when a task is just hard enough to make you struggle, but not so hard that you give up. If it's too easy, the brain doesn't change. If it's too hard, the brain switches to avoidance. Fast learners are very good at adjusting this difficulty. They don't wait until they feel ready. They start early, but on a small scale. Instead of trying to remember an entire chapter, they ask one question. Instead of solving a full exam, they attempt one problem. Instead of studying all afternoon, they study a short block and retrieve immediately. And every time they do this, the brain learns an unspoken lesson. This struggle is useful. This is worth keeping. Slow learners tend to do the opposite. They avoid struggle. They try to make everything smooth and comfortable. And because of that, their brains never receive a reason to change. This is where you need to pause and ask yourself an important question. The last time learning felt uncomfortable, what did you do? Did you stay a little longer? Or did you switch tasks to feel better? That answer explains a lot about your speed. But retrieval is only part of the story. There's something even more powerful and even more ignored. It determines whether retrieval turns into long-term memory or just a tiring effort. And that's where we talk about output. Part 3. Why output makes you faster than most people. There's a very simple reason why many people watch a lot but never actually get better. Your brain is not designed to remember what you only consume. It's designed to remember what it is responsible for producing. That's the line between two types of learners: consumers and builders. Consumers take in information. They watch videos, read books, listen to podcasts, take beautiful notes. They feel busy. They feel tired. And they believe that feeling tired means progress. But when it's time to use what they learned, their mind goes blank. Builders are different. They don't ask, "Have I finished watching everything?" They ask, "What can I create from what I just learned?" The moment you switch from consuming to creating, something very different happens in your brain. Your brain is forced to reorganize information. It can't keep things vague anymore. It has to decide what's essential and what's noise. And that act of deciding is what creates memory. Take a familiar example: learning a language. Consumers watch lots of videos and memorize lots of words. While watching, they understand. While reading, things feel familiar. But the moment they try to speak, their brain freezes. Builders do the opposite. They learn very little. But after each session, they speak, even if it's wrong, even if they hesitate, even if the sentence sounds terrible. And every time they speak, the brain is forced to choose which word to use, which structure fits, what's missing. Mistakes become very obvious. But along with mistakes comes data, and that data lets the brain adjust far faster than watching 10 more videos ever could. The same thing happens with programming. One person watches endless tutorials. Everything looks logical. But when they open the editor, they don't know where to start, because their brain has never had to organize the logic on its own. Another person watches very little, but after each piece, they rewrite the code from memory. The code breaks. Errors everywhere. But every error forces the brain to understand how the parts relate, and that struggle is what creates speed. You don't remember what you consume. You remember what you're forced to express. That's why teaching is one of the fastest learning methods ever discovered. When you teach, even if it's just to yourself, your brain has nowhere to hide. It has to clarify. You're forced to answer uncomfortable questions. What does this actually mean? How does it connect to the other idea? Which part matters most? Which part can be ignored? Every time you answer one of those questions, the brain locks the information in more tightly, not because you heard it again, but because you restructured it. Many people delay output because they're waiting until they feel good enough. But the feeling of being good enough only comes after you've produced enough output. Fast learners don't wait for permission. They create before they feel ready. And because of that, they become ready sooner. A subtle shift happens when you start creating. You're no longer learning just to know. You're learning to use. And when the goal is use, the brain starts asking different questions. Where does this apply? When would I need this? If I removed this part, would it still work? Those questions turn scattered knowledge into a system, and systems are always remembered better than isolated facts. This is also where identity begins to change. You're no longer someone who is learning. You become someone who is doing. That difference matters, because your brain behaves according to the identity you believe. If you see yourself as someone who is preparing, your brain allows delay. If you see yourself as someone who is building, your brain is forced into action. There's a common misunderstanding here. Many people think output has to be big, polished, public. That's not true. The most effective output is usually very small. A 2-minute voice note explaining the idea, a diagram drawn from memory, a short paragraph, an explanation spoken out loud. Your brain doesn't care about an audience. It cares about responsibility. The moment you know you have to explain something, your brain changes how it processes information. However, output only works at full power when it's placed in the right time frame and environment. Otherwise, it turns into exhaustion. And that's where the next factor comes in: time, focus, and systems. Part 4: Why time and systems determine speed. There's a very common belief that quietly makes you learn slower without you realizing it. The more time you spend, the more you'll learn. It sounds reasonable, but if it were true, the people who study the longest hours would be the fastest learners. In reality, the opposite is true. Your brain doesn't reward long duration. It rewards intensity of attention. When you tell yourself you'll study all afternoon, your brain sees a large, vague, stretched out task. It doesn't know where it ends. And when there's no clear endpoint, the brain activates avoidance. You procrastinate. You take a long time to warm up. You check your phone for a moment. And before you realize it, most of the time is gone before real learning even begins. Fast learners do the opposite. They make time small and visible. Instead of saying, "I'll study today," they say, "I have 25 minutes." A session so short that the brain doesn't perceive it as a threat. And because the brain isn't afraid, focus rises quickly. There's a biological reason for this. Your attention system isn't designed to stay at peak intensity for long periods. It works in rhythms. When you force it too long, the quality of thinking drops sharply, even if you're still sitting there. A short, distraction-free study block followed by immediate retrieval creates more change in the brain than a long, interrupted marathon, not because you studied less, but because your brain actually worked during that time. This is where an important law comes in. Work expands to fill the time you give it. If you give yourself the whole afternoon, studying will take the whole afternoon, regardless of where the real value is. Fast learners don't give the brain room to stretch. They limit time to force sharpness. When time is scarce, the brain stops wasting energy on side decisions. It goes straight to what matters. But short time alone isn't enough. Because if you have to make new decisions every time you study, your brain gets tired before you even begin. This is where systems come in. A system replaces motivation. It doesn't care how you feel, it just runs. Fast learners often study at the same time every day, in the same place, with the same tools, for the same duration, using the same process. It sounds boring, but that boredom removes a huge burden: decision fatigue. Every time you decide when to study, where to study, how to study, your brain spends energy. And when that energy runs low, you choose the easy path. You delay. When the system is fixed, the brain doesn't argue, it just follows. And that's what creates consistency, something motivation can never guarantee. There's another factor people often overlook: environment. Your brain always chooses the easiest and clearest path. Not because you're weak, but because that's how it's optimized. If your phone is within reach, checking it is the easy path. If your book is already open, studying is the easy path. Fast learners don't fight this. They design it. They remove friction from the right actions and add friction to the wrong ones. Phone far away, notifications off, clear desk, materials already open, topic decided in advance. When the environment pulls in the right direction, you don't need to force focus, you just need to show up. This sounds almost too simple. And that's exactly why most people ignore it. They look for advanced techniques while missing the most basic levers. Here's a hard truth. Many people don't learn slowly because they lack ability. They learn slowly because they're fighting their own environment every time they sit down. Fast learners don't. They make learning the default option. And when it's the default, speed increases without extra effort. But even with short focused time, strong systems, and a well-designed environment, there's still one phase where many people quit. The phase where progress stops feeling obvious. No motivation, no immediate reward. That phase is silence. Part 5. The silent phase where most people quit. There's a phase in learning that, if you're not warned about it in advance, you will almost certainly misinterpret. It's the moment when everything goes quiet. No more breakthroughs, no more aha moments, no more excitement from immediate understanding. Only repetition remains, slow, steady, and it feels like it's going nowhere. This is where most people quit. They look at how they feel and conclude that the method isn't working, that they're not improving, that they must be doing something wrong. But the truth is the opposite. This is exactly the phase where real learning happens. When you've stopped consuming and started retrieving, when you've begun producing output, when you've been learning in short, focused sessions, your brain no longer gives you obvious dopamine spikes. Instead, it's doing something far quieter. It's restructuring. Like roots growing underground before the tree appears above the surface. The most important part of learning happens when nothing feels special. Slow learners interpret this silence as a stop signal. Fast learners interpret it as a continue signal, not because they're more disciplined, but because they understand what it means. Your brain doesn't reward every small improvement with dopamine. If it did, you'd become addicted to novelty and quit the moment it disappeared. Instead, it builds the foundation in silence, and only later allows speed to emerge. That's why so many people say learning suddenly becomes easier after a while. Not because the material got simpler, but because the internal structure has formed. And there's one factor that determines whether you stay long enough to reach that point. Identity. Pay attention to how you describe yourself. Do you say, "I'm trying to learn faster," or do you say, "I'm a fast learner"? It sounds like a small detail, but your brain behaves according to the identity you believe is true. If you see yourself as someone who is trying, your brain allows you to stop when you're tired, because trying implies the possibility of failure. But if you see yourself as a fast learner, every small action becomes a vote for that identity. Every time you retrieve before you feel ready, 1 vote. Every time you produce output while still clumsy, 1 vote. Every 25-minute focused session, 1 vote. Identity doesn't change through affirmations. It changes through repeated behavior. And when identity changes, speed becomes a consequence, not a goal. That's why fast learners don't need to relearn the same lesson 10 times. They don't need daily motivation. They don't need to psych themselves up. They simply do what aligns with who they believe they are. And that person isn't born, it's built. Look at the full picture now. Your brain doesn't learn by rereading. It learns by retrieval. Discomfort isn't the problem, it's the signal. Output locks memory in place. Short, focused time beats long study sessions. Systems replace motivation. Environment shapes behavior. And identity holds everything together. This isn't about studying harder, not longer, not more perfectly. It's about stopping the things that give your brain no reason to remember. The fastest learners weren't born different. They simply learned in a way that matches how the brain actually works. And that's why it looks unfairly fast. But now you know, it's not unfair, it's just correct. In the next 24 hours, don't try to change your entire learning life. Do one thing, choose a small topic, set a 25-minute timer, study, then close the material and retrieve. Even if you're wrong, even if it's uncomfortable, even if it's messy, if you do that, you've sent a very different signal to your brain. And that signal, repeated over time, will change your speed quietly but unmistakably. If this video helped you see learning differently, hit like so the channel knows to go deeper in this direction. And subscribe, because the next video will show you how to lock in the fast learner identity, so you don't snap back to your old state the moment learning gets hard again. Not through motivation, but through design.